Welcome to the Water Table Podcast. I'm joined here today by Keegan Kult, the Executive Director of the Ag Drainage Management Coalition, or the ADMC. Keegan, thanks a lot for hopping on and joining the Water Table here this afternoon.
Yeah, anytime, Trey, and thanks for getting me on here after I put in that request so quick. So
Yeah, exactly. Kind of everything's working out pretty good, and I'm not sure. Have you been on in the past, or has it been a while?
it's been a little while, maybe a year or so ago.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, good to have you back on. And kind of what we're getting after here is a little bit of an update from the ADMC and what you've been doing here for the last little while. I know it's been you've been pretty busy with a lot of the grants and proposals and different projects and all this other stuff. So kind of hit on some of that, but maybe we want to take a step back right away and just say what is this Ag Drainage Management Coalition? What is the ADMC, and what is your role within it?
Yeah, thanks, Trey. So, Ag Drainage Management Coalition, we're industry-led coalition looking to advance ag water management. So working with a lot of the best management practices out there for tile drainage. We really think we're kind of the NGO that's really focusing on all things, water, and we try to give that voice to the industry on what practices would work, kind of practical solutions, and then how do we actually get these solutions out there to scale, implement them in a meaningful way at a significant enough level. My role within the ADMC executive director, so I get to do a little bit of everything. We do a lot of work to get membership, of course. We appreciate all of our members. Prinsco there, one of our diamond level members. So it's great to have you guys on board and be able to do things like this. But, we're about 50% funded through membership and then 50% funded through grant and project work. And so you really kind of try to find that balance. We're hoping to grow the organization. I think the industry is really seeing, significance in trying to unify that voice and get it out there, get the message out there, and make it even bigger and better than what it has been for the past 20 years. So we're really looking to do that going into 2025 here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe just touch on that a little bit more on what that membership there. It's a lot of pipe manufacturers and also some engineering firms, some regular tile contractors and whatnot that are all kind of members of ADMC, and that's what we're getting after is like, hey, we're all in the same boat for a lot of this stuff, and we need to have that unified voice of the industry with a strong vision saying, hey, this is where we're going. These are some of the issues that we need to address. Not just as a Prinsco or not just as an individual, manufacturer, contractor, or whatever, but being able to have that vision and keep going forward as the industry, and that's that role that ADMC is playing. So really important role, and I guess which creates a lot of work for yourself and for everybody else too there. But maybe we can dive into a little bit of what you've been up to, or what some of the projects that ADMC gets involved with.
Yeah, some of the kind of the bigger ones that are taking up most of my time, and I think about a lot right now, is working on really the practice delivery, right? And so we've all heard the headaches and heartbreaks of trying to work through some of these financial assistance programs that are available. Through no fault of the agencies, there's just a lot of steps that need to be followed on that. And I kind of think a lot of these systems were designed for more kind of in-field management type practices. And when we talk about tiling type projects and then the edge of field management of those, things are just a little bit different. There's different barriers, and maybe trying to do it through a traditional cost share program like EQIP hasn't really yielded the best results yet. But we really think there's ways that we can tweak it and put things in favor so landowners are interested in these projects. So we call it the batch and build. You guys have talked about the batch and build quite a bit on this podcast with some of the different people that have participated in these batch and build programs. But we really are working on kind of developing that framework for the batch and build to really get it out there and get more people involved in being able to implement these. So that process is happening right now in Iowa quite a bit, and I'm excited to see that's replicated. It started in Polk County, but it's expanded. You had Heartland Co-op on here, Ruth McCabe, a few times. They're doing phenomenal work. I think they're going into about year 2, so they're already putting in their first batch right now in 2 different spots of Iowa, and then they're going to roll up again and do it again next year. And so that's exciting to see that they're still seeing that interest in there. They're able to replicate it. City of Cedar Rapids is doing a really big one as well. But so we're trying to document just how that works, and going around to different states, because other states are very interested in replicating this too, especially across the Midwest right now.
Hmm. Yeah, and maybe just to review that, I guess the process or the benefits of doing things that way, and maybe I'll take a stab at it, and you can correct me. It might be too simple for it, but essentially it's saturated buffers and denitrifying bioreactors or wood chip bioreactors are the two main practices that you're looking at with these edge of field practices. So you go into a watershed and target certain areas saying, hey, I know that, I think a buffer will work on these certain outlets and a bioreactor here. Let's put all these practices together, get the design work done, and kind of pitch that to a contractor to install it, where you can kind of look at that watershed, get maybe a few dozen of them done through this process versus, maybe the onesie twosies if you have a certain progressive farmer or landowner that wants to do those on their own. So is that a decent overview of it, or what am I missing on there?
No, that's a great, and thanks for kind of reminding me. I should probably step back and fill in those gaps for people. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. We kind of taken the onus off the farmer. So what we did, we really just sat down and looked at what's all kind of holding the process up to getting these practices implemented. When we think about it, a lot of times projects are like, well, let's just throw a lot of money at it, right? Let's get that financial assistance up to 100% and see what happens. But there's other barriers, not just the, how much something costs. So we know it's hard for a contractor, for example, to maybe take off from a bigger job to go install a onesie twosie saturated buffer, right? So they're not going to want to mobilize to put in one site, for half a day, because that just comes at an expense to the contractor. So they're basically doing that as a favor to one of their landowners. And then same way with the designers, right? So if we're doing these one or two at a time, the engineering is very expensive because somebody has to go out there and survey. So, it's much more efficient. Hey, we can do 10 sites in a day instead of just one or two out there. And so we're really trying to figure out all those things. And, we thought, hey, if we kind of created this fiscal agent model, or maybe not even create's not a good word, because a lot of other, projects have utilized a fiscal agent model, but what if we applied that to edge of field practices? And so that fiscal agent really acts as that agreement holder with the funding agencies, with the landowners, and with the contractors. So we kind of just centralize it, right? And then all of a sudden, instead of putting in one or two at a time, we can group these things into batches, of 20, 20 to 30 at a time. And then all of a sudden, the landowners are more excited about it. They're excited for multiple reasons. Some of the pressure's taken off of them. They don't have to hire, and they're not the ones hiring and managing the contractor. They're not fronting the cost of this. A lot of times with these financial assistance programs, the contractor would have to invoice the farmer or landowner. The landowner would pay the contractor and then get reimbursed. And they're really just the middleman at that point. So why can't we eliminate that? So that's what we do with the fiscal agent on that. But then the farmers are also excited. Not only are they not doing that managing, but they're like, hey, this actually is a big enough project to make a difference, right? If we're only putting in one saturated buffer, in a watershed that has another 150 outlets in it, they're like, well, what's the purpose of that? But all of a sudden, if you can talk to them and say, your neighbors, we got 4 of your neighbors lined up right now, and we're looking at 50 of those outlets, and then people are more excited to jump on with it. And then on the flip side, I think contractors are realizing, hey, this could be a way to fill in the gaps, right? And we got 15, 20 sites to do. That's 2 weeks worth of work. That'd be great for, get their, guys out there, extend their season a little bit longer. Hopefully they can do these installs during the summer or, before the big tiling seasons really get going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was kind of something that you guys, I believe at ADMC, kind of proved out that in Polk County, in some of those areas, some of those watersheds, and now you mentioned it's been replicated a few times, and getting more popular throughout Iowa. Where are some of the hotspots that you were seeing? I think you mentioned Cedar Rapids, and probably still around Des Moines area there too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Polk County is probably almost maxed out now of sites. They've done so many. I think they put in like 135 sites the first 2 years, and then picked up a few more. But yeah, like Heartland Co-op, they're doing one in central Iowa, and then a little bit southeast Iowa. City of Cedar Rapids, that's kind of east central Iowa. I wouldn't quite call it northeast Iowa yet, but it's on the verge of being northeast Iowa. And they have a really big one. That one's exciting. Their city is leading that, and they're going to have a few hundred sites go in over the next couple years with that, and they're putting sites in the ground right now, so that's fun to see. Yeah, then there's just pockets all over the state of Iowa where we're doing these. Maybe not quite as big, might only be pockets of 20 to 25 projects, but there's coordinators, across the whole state of Iowa that's really making an effort to do it this way. And yeah, our Department of Ag and Land Stewardship, that's how they're focusing on doing these installations now. They see the benefit of it and how worthwhile it is. And so I always kind of go back to, before we might have been crawling to get these practices in. I think now we're up to walking speed, and maybe some, in the next couple of years we'll be running again.
Hmm.
So now we're putting a couple hundred in a year. Hopefully, in the next 3 to 4 years, all of a sudden that number's a couple thousand.
Right on. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, it's
I'll
exciting to
just say
see.
it's optimistic.
It is
But yeah,
optimistic.
I mean, keeping that trend going, and like you said, it's proving out the the areas where it works and how it works, and there's not a reason. Well, I shouldn't say there's not many reasons why it can't be that way either. And especially once you get that ball rolling with more landowners seeing what their neighbors are doing and thinking, hey, there's these buffers on streams. Let's say run some more water through it. If you're not seeing any issues with, I guess, anything else, you're not backing up your tile system, you're not eroding your stream banks, and all that other stuff. So you mentioned it's a win-win for kind of all parties on that aspect. And if you have enough contractors be able to stay busy with this too, like you mentioned, it's not out of the realm of possibilities to have that get up to running here, on some of this implementation
Yeah,
here soon.
and like we're seeing that shift now where we're having, there's landowners and farmers calling, wanting to participate in this, not people going out the other way. I mean, the outreach is a very important component of this, the direct outreach model that we use, and actually making those phone calls. But now it's been out there long enough that people are calling into the offices to say, hey, how can I get this involved on this? It might not be a majority of farmers by any means yet, but it's definitely a shift from what we've seen in the past. And I kind of like going back to that Polk County model. It really left a good taste in the farmer's mouth, I would say, of just participating within, how intentional it was. And it got them thinking about water management. So those farmers, basically they treated every outlet on this 4 Mile creek, and they're like, well, we still got some of the really big, county mains. What can we do here? And they've gone through now, they've done a couple wetlands on there. And so they're kind of working back up in the watershed now, and doing more different types of water management practices. I think that's where things like drainage water management will come into play. It might be really good to work with a new group of farmers and landowners in a watershed, do a batch and build to do saturated buffers and bioreactors. Then like, hey, back up further. Like if you're not next to the stream, you can participate and do something like drainage water management. And that's the one where we can see that return on investment for the farmers. And so once they start getting more aware that they can manage this water, I think there's gonna be more and more interest on doing so. And then of course, it's all about having good customer service, right? To actually deliver on these projects, and instead of turning people away.
For sure. And that's, it continues to amaze me, but, talking with farmers and, might not necessarily be in the most progressive areas or the most progressive farmers I'm talking to, but just trying to explain what a control structure is, or, control drainage water management, sub irrigation, the theory of, the reasoning why drainage water recycling can be beneficial. They're like, oh yeah, well, I kind of thought about something like that, or it's maybe not a bad idea. I'm like, well, technologies have been in place have been around for decades, and some of these practices have been installed that way too. And it's just kind of, that's something that I think is not completely understood or addressed across the board. Of you can manage everything else, your fertilizer, your seed, your tillage, your everything that else they have on your land, but looking at it with water, that's not always the case. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there to start to turn that meter, maybe not flip the switch, but start to lean in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it is just a shift. We don't have to do things the same way now that we did, 50 years ago, and we don't. We've improved technologies and drainage as we've gone. Between clay tile to plastic pipe now, the laser to GPS. And so this is kind of the next iteration. I think is, hey, letting people know like we can manage this. We don't need to be draining all the time. And we all think about the spring of the year when it's really important and crucial to get out there and warm those soils up, and that's when we need that drainage to be doing work. But then later during the summer, even earlier than late summer, you can start holding that water back and let those roots grow down into it. And then all of a sudden, we're seeing that benefit. usually water is the limiting factor on what those yields end up being. People are pretty good at knowing how much nitrogen they need to apply to get that yield goal. But as far as having enough water, that's always important. Something we don't always think about in the
Hmm.
Midwest because we think, oh yeah, we got plenty of rain, but that rain doesn't fall at the right time. And so the more control we have, the better off people will be.
Yep, for sure. And having a conversation with the previous guest too of, that just gives you more flexibility with what you're growing or your different rotations or like your different tillage practices, your cover crops. Essentially, everything gets to benefit from having that water managed under the surface. So, yeah, essentially being able to build out your playbook and have more options, more opportunity for doing things a little bit differently. But yeah, it all kind of gets back to starting with what are you doing with the water? What are you doing underground there too? What else you got rolling with ADMC? Other
Yeah,
projects?
so we know recently we just put out a contractor survey this summer. We were excited about that. We got some good responses, and thanks all of our members for pushing it out to their customers. That was a big help. But that survey, we just really wanted to, we called it the pulse of the industry, and that's really what it was. We wanted to get in contact with more contractors out there, and kind of see what are the issues they see coming up in the next year or two. Same thing, what are the different opportunities that they're thinking about for themselves, where are they getting their education from, what type of education do they need. And we haven't released the results of that yet. We're still kind of processing, and we will shortly. But no, that was kind of exciting to see. And that all that's going into trying to grow what ADMC is doing. We're going to be doing a little strategic planning at our annual meeting come November. And so that input from that survey is going to have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and I know that we pushed that out a few times to try to get as many contractors as we can to get good feedback. And we're always been saying it for whether it's our design of our pipe or our fittings or whatever else is. We're only essentially as good as the feedback that we can get from the customers. And same thing with this too is we can put together all the technical literature or training type stuff, but if it ain't hitting the mark with what they're asking for, then we're flying a little bit blind to it. So yeah, excited to hear more about those results of that survey and figure out the role that we can play with more of that education and training and kind of build up our industry from a technical standpoint, and build up that base a little more on whether it is these practices or just different ways that they can be running their operations and having an overall benefit for that too.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're doing right now as well with that information, we're doing a website redesign. So our website a little bit dated. It was me, I think, trying to figure out how to use WordPress 5 years ago and putting it together. I think I put it together well once, but now trying to edit it, I don't know if I did it right on the front end to be able to do it now on the back end. But so we have some funding in place right now to do a redesign, and one of the things that we're looking at doing is this conservation drainage. We're going to call it the resource center. There's a lot of good information out there right now. It's just kind of broken into different pieces and on different sites, and so we kind of want to be that kind of trusted clearinghouse, right? And get all that information put together in one place, and everything from conservation drainage basics, what the practices are, why you would use them, maybe some cost estimates of the practices. But then, how do you get from, educating yourself about the practice to actually installing it? So that process of working with different financial assistance programs, we're hoping to incorporate that into the website and have some nice, how-to videos of, right, here's the expected NRCS batching dates. That usually happens in March. Here's that conversation you should have with that district conservationist about these practices. Unfortunately, maybe not every county is really familiar with all these practices. You might even receive a little feedback. So what to do in that situation? Kind of have a list of names of people, like the state conservation engineers are very well versed in all these practices, and they're kind of a champion for them, or they should be if they're not. And so we're working with those people right now, just so there's somebody like in every state that you can call and hopefully get some advice and answers on these things.
Yeah, because that's kind of the one of the main issues that we run into is, yeah, you can talk to the contractor about some of this stuff of, hey, you should be looking out for X, Y, and Z for how to set up controlled drainage systems, or hey, these are the acres that it works well, or same thing with the farmers, or but it doesn't. Once you do have somebody interested, then it's kind of like, okay, yep, now what? Where do I go for some of that stuff? And I think that's going to be really useful tool for that website to have, that information there, and some of those how-to guides, and probably highlight some success stories on, ways that it worked out well, and showing some of the impact that we have on that too. So be happy to help out and work with you guys to help develop that and see the needs that we have to keep the good work going.
Well, it sounds like you volunteered, Trey. So
Yep.
I got
tend
your
to
name down.
right. I tend to do that. Start talking like, oh yeah, hey, maybe that's a good idea. So, no, absolutely happy to help on that front too. So we'll be able to keep things going, and I'm sure we'll have you back on and give an update once we have it live and be able to walk through it.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about it. It's something that needs to get done. Like I said, that information's out there, so hopefully we can get it all in one spot. We're not trying to recreate the wheel or anything, but we feel like it's needed, and so I think it'll be a very, very useful tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then another thing within ADMC that I believe you're working on, or that you have worked on, is just kind of overall working with NRCS and some of those programs that that governs a lot of these conservation practices. You want to talk about some of your work there that you've been, or that's kind of come down over the last few months?
Yeah. So probably the big one, and we were talking about it earlier before we hopped on here, is the Climate Smart Ag and Forestry Practice List. And not to get into the weeds, but there's a lot of funding out there right now through the Inflation Reduction Act. Nearly $20 billion going towards conservation practices. But to be eligible for that funding, you need to have your practices on this Climate Smart list. And so ADMC, through partners with the Conservation Drainage Network, have been working pretty hard to try to actually get some of our drainage practices included on that. We believe water management is a huge component to working with changing climate. It's on top of farmers' mind all the time about what to do with these bigger rainfalls and then episodic drier events too. So we had a task force group that through the Conservation Drainage Network really dug into the literature that's out there. Had experts, people smarter than me, come together to talk about this, but and they found that indirectly these practices probably reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and even so somewhat directly too. So we did get a couple practices listed right now. Drainage water management and saturated buffers are both eligible. They did come with a couple big caveats though, unfortunately. So hopefully maybe next year we can provide more data to get some of those removed. The drainage water management is basically looking at existing drainage in organic soils. So those are kind of what, if you have a farmer that says, oh, I got this peat soil back here or this muck soil, that's the kind of soil that they're talking about. And then with the saturated buffer, if it's a new buffer going in, so if it's previously cultivated, and by previously cultivated, they mean the last couple years, and then you're putting in a new grass filter strip with a saturated buffer, then it's eligible to be on this Climate Smart list. I will say though, all these practices, they can be facilitating practices or companion practices. And so if you're applying for cost share on something else, you can loop these in and get some of that Climate Smart funding. So, if you're doing some nitrogen management or cover crops, you can talk about drainage water management, how that helps, with the cover crop field, and then you can get funding that way. So there is, that avenue, but, our goal still is to get these listed as standalone practices and, hopefully don't have the.
Yeah, a couple comments with that, and one question with specifically. So with like you mentioned, drainage water management and peat soil or organic soil, I guess. So if you essentially have a pattern tiled lake bottom, that's the application where this funding would apply the best. Essentially, turn that conventional drainage system into drainage water management or into controlled drainage. I got that right?
Yeah. And you can make some changes to it. You can't increase like the drainage area of that, but if you need to change the layout of it, that is allowable to make it work with drainage water management. But yeah, it's very specific. That's not a very widespread situation. Although you guys in Minnesota might have more of that than other people in the Midwest.
Right. There's some of it here and there, but yeah, as far as compatible acres for drainage water management, to me that's a very small piece.
Yeah, in the Midwest, there's about 30 million acres that are thought to be suitable for that practice, and so that's a very small footprint of those 30 million acres.
Right.
That probably not even 1% of that would be my guess. And so,
But like you mentioned, that's where having more of that research or understanding and kind of leverage the, I guess, like I said, all the smart people with a lot of letters after their names at the CDN to be able to justify more or to give that backing more, I guess, to that point of saying, hey, this is, we got our foot in the door with the organic soil, but if we can scale that out a little bit more, and make all acres applicable for this, that's where you'd actually get some more momentum with it.
yeah, definitely. And, we, even if it's not directly on that for all acres, there's still other funding opportunities available
Mm-hmm.
for it, and we're still working on that. And drainage water management is one of those practices that, we think there's a return for the farmer on it too. So hopefully, we can get out in front of more farmers and show them that benefit and that value of controlling your drainage and getting that ROI back. So I think more farmers might be willing to forego some of the programs out there just to install it, on their own dime because they can see the value in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then also wanted to hit on what you mentioned with the saturated buffers, and you said that stipulation it's currently a crop. So essentially, if you have ditch bank, stream bank that doesn't have a buffer on it, it's currently being cultivated. You have a tile outlet running through there. If you're going to vegetate it, might as well put a saturated buffer in there as well. If you're kind of converting that to regular riparian buffer and then saturate it, that would be the application there. I got that one tracking right?
Yep, that's exactly it, Trey. And so, there are probably quite a few spots where that will work. Right now, probably a majority of the saturated buffers we see go in are on existing buffer strip. That's why it's kind of an attractive practice because generally, we're not taking additional acres out of production. It's something that's already been taken out of production, and then we just make that buffer do more work for us by making it a saturated buffer versus just the traditional one. But once again, hopefully we can pull together some more data, do some more monitoring with our friends there at CDN. To provide that input to NRCS for them to consider next year.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the rolling time frame every year. They're re-looking at this list and kind of reevaluating if their priorities are set straight.
Yep, exactly. And we work pretty closely. We actually have a MOU coming out with NRCS hopefully in the next couple months, and it's basically just to increase that relationship. We have great feedback. Their national water management engineer, Alan Gillespie, does a really good job communicating, what the agency's working on and, what needs they have and what information that they need to kind of do their job. And so we kind of try to fill that role and plug in that information gaps for them. So, they can roll out, improve their programs. They're always kind of reevaluating, what they're doing and how they're doing it. And so, kind of being that feedback loop from on the ground to what's happening, over in DC.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Well, yeah, we covered a lot, and like mentioned, there's a lot of stuff going on at ADMC and a lot of things that are keeping you busy. So I appreciate the time coming on here. Did we cover everything, or did we miss anything else that's on your mind, or that you got hot priority on?
No, other than just, there's a lot of exciting opportunities, I think, especially for contractors hearing this to, educate themselves on these practices and kind of what's moving forward. We had a great national water management forum there in Indiana this summer with LICA. And then this winter, of course, the North American Conservation and Ag Drainage Expo will be happening in Indianapolis in January. Going to be a lot of great speakers there and opportunities to learn more and more about these practices and water management and what can be done and what it's going to look like in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I know when we did the first NACADE, I'll just call it that, National Conservation Drainage, anyway, or North America, anyway, really great show. And maybe just to put an early plug in for it is, like you mentioned, that's the intention that they had setting up that show, is saying, hey, let's bring in all the industry vendors and then then be able to bait in the contractors for that and have it be a contractor show, then also pair that strong education element with it too. So brought in a lot of the researchers and a lot of the experts within the industry to talk through all the things that we're seeing in everybody's kind of respective areas of expertise. And all the feedback that I've got on it was a great success, and that's what contractors were after. It's, hey, let's go talk to our pipe salesman or plow salesman or trencher, and then but also, hey, there's everybody clears out of the convention hall and went up to the classrooms for a few hours to learn more about what they're doing. And I think that's a really good show and good tool and a good avenue to keep spreading that information. And I think you mentioned it's in Indianapolis, and I don't have the dates in front of me, but sometime in January, I believe.
Yeah, later January, and they're expecting a big turnout at it again. I think they had 500 people come through that first year, and then maybe hopefully double that this time around. So yeah, a lot of great chances for those hallway conversations in addition to what's going on in the classroom. And that's just a great example of kind of the industry coming together. Everybody's competitors probably on that trade room floor, but they see the value of kind of these educational opportunities and kind of raising the tide for everybody.
For sure. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that one. And then I guess here in the meantime, we got fall's just kind of kicking off. Recording this at the end of September, and be keeping everybody busy with harvest and tiling season. And hopefully we'll have plenty of fall to get that done, and we won't get froze out too early. But
Yeah, hopefully everybody's busy this fall and everybody stays safe and get us again to next year.
yep, for sure. Well, awesome. I appreciate it again, Keegan. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for your time here this afternoon. And uh, appreciate all your work and all the expertise they have and sharing it on the water table here.
Yep, thank you, Trey.